Hello, welcome to Nige Tutorials. I'm Nige. This tutorial is going to be Camera Intent Tutorial Part 1. In this tutorial we're just going to be introducing you just to the basic setup of an Android project using Android Studio. Okay, let's get started. Okay, I'm going to click here, start a new Android project. And application name, I'm just going to call it Camera Intent Tutorial. You understand down here is your company domain. If you've got a website, you can use a web URL. Notice how the URL is the reverse of what you normally see. So I'm just using com.nigel.henshaw. So you can use whatever you like in this sort of format. Okay, click next. Project location is just the default location of where I installed Android Studio. So we'll select next. Okay, I'm not going to use the very latest Android 5.1 at this moment in time. I'm just going to use 5.0 because I haven't updated my Nexus device, but use whatever version of Android that you're going to be running on your device. So we'll select next. And I just want to use a blank activity here. I don't want to have anything else extra installed for the purposes of tutorials. If we need to add functionality, we'll do that manually. So blank activity. I'm just going to call this, I think we're only going to have one activity for this project, so I'm just going to call it Camera Intent Activity. And that's it. We can just select Finish. Wait for it to do its stuff. Okay, the project's basically nearly completed here. It's Android Studio has automatically directed us into the layouts, and it's created a layout file for us, a relative layout file for us. So relative, I'm just going to select design over here. As you can see in this area here, you can get lots of different types of layouts. I'm not going to spend time discussing them all. I will create another tutorial showing up in the box here where I will go into a little bit more detail about layouts. Anyway, what I did is I selected design here, so you actually see what your application is going to look like when it's first run from your device. Let's go back into the text tab, and the main thing here is we're using a relative layout, and we've got a text view. So by default, Android as a default project has set us with a little text view called Hello World there. So when you run the application, you're going to get Hello World text show up. So this is the key point here. Views live inside layouts. And if we go back here, you see you can get lots of different views. They tend to have view appended to the end of the name. So maybe not down here, but you've got a good selection of views, and you can also create your own views if you want, inherent of other base views if you wanted. Okay, so that's the layout file. I just want to show you a couple more important files just for reference here. The next one that lives inside the Manifest folder, app Manifest, is called the AndroidManifest XML. This is a very important file. Never forget this file. It's not used to hold your source code as such or your libraries. What it is here is the glue that holds all your project together. You can add permissions, which we'll go into detail later on. Permissions are if you want to use extra functionality from your camera, whether it's storage or you want to use the actual camera itself, APIs, or if you want to even use Google APIs, they have to be added as permissions, and that would go into the manifest file here. We've got the application. You need to have the application, basically to have your Android application defined. And inside the application, you've got these activities here. So the activity is just a representation of what you see on your screen at any one time. It's basically the activity is mapped to your layout, which can contain any number of views. So you need your activity. It's what you see in your application itself. Inside here, we've got the activity name, and that's the camera intent activity that I called. And the last point here I want to highlight is the intent filter. So the intent filter is what you define starts your application, or what you define starts your activity, or how your activity will respond to a message or communication. So an intent activity here is just basically you say how you want your activity to start, what triggers it as such. And the main thing down here is the category. So we're saying that this is a category launcher. Basically that just means when you see the icon, you launch the application manually from an icon. And that's what this intent filter does. It means it's the entry point into your activity, starting your activity or starting your application itself by defining launcher here. So we won't go into any other details at this moment in time. We'll sort of build bit by bit progressively. And the last file I just want to show you here is the camera intent activity. Okay, we're only going to focus on the on create function. So activity here is what we defined inside our AndroidManifest there, and the actual source code lives in Java. Our project name we defined before, and here's our source file here. So here's our activity. It extends an activity. That's the name of the class name of the activity. And inside the onCreate here, we've just got one function I want to focus on here called setContentView. SetContentView is where you want to display your activity onto, basically it's just displaying your activity onto a layout. And so basically we've got the setContentView. It doesn't have to be a layout. You can put a view inside here as well. Just look in the Android documentation for that. But normal practice of when you default create an activity is you'll get a layout file here, and basically when you enter the layout file inside this function, it inflates the layout file with what you defined, going back to your layout file, with what you defined in here. And so basically you're just going to have a single text view displayed in there saying hello world. Okay, that's basically all there is to creating your default project. I'm not going to go into details about the onCreate option menu or the on options menu selected. That's the menu functionality of an application. It's given to you by default. It's outside what I want to focus on this tutorial here, so we're just going to leave it out. Okay, that's it. So the next step here is I just want to run my Android application I created from default. I haven't made any changes or anything. This is just the default view here. So just go up towards the middle top, and I've got Run App, Control R if you're using a Mac. And so I'm just going to select that now. And there's something happening right at the very bottom there. And I've got a Nexus 4 plugged in via USB cable to my MacBook. So I'm just going to select OK. And I'm going to start recording that. Okay, so I now have that's your application running on here. I'm taking a recording of this as well to make it easier for you to see. And I actually don't have anything else to say about this because that's the application. It's just a single text file saying hello world. So that's it. That's the default out of the box. Okay, so I'll go back to my Android Studio. There's just one final thing I want to do here and just to show you. Next to the play button, we've got a debug app. And what you can do that, you can set points in your source code in your project where you actually want the application to stop running, stop executing, so you can see what's happening at that moment in time inside the application. So I'm just going to give you a quick demonstration of that. First thing we're going to do is add a breakpoint. So all you have to do is, next to the number in the source file here, just clicking on my mouse pad, we've got the orange dot there. That's a breakpoint. So when I execute this application to run again, it's just going to stop at this particular line. So we just click this. It runs a bit slower because it's actually going through an additional set of libraries which are mapping to each function call. So we have the file here. Okay, and we've stopped at this line. What we also see here is I can actually step down the lines of the source file, or I can step into the functions being called themselves, whatever I choose, and I can actually see the variables inside the function, inside the file itself, so I can actually see what values are being assigned and whether or not a variable has got data or is null as such. So at the moment, inside this function there are no variables, but we've got lots of member variables in the actual activity itself. And yeah, so it's a good point, especially if you're starting to have problems with your application and you suspect that something's not happening in a certain place. One of your first point of calls is to use this debug app and stop what you think something's going wrong and to have a look around there. So that's a quick introduction to the Android Studio debug functionality. And that's basically all. This is just a very basic intro to people who probably haven't seen Android before, maybe know a bit of C++ or Java, but just very curious to see what Android and Android Studio is about. So in this very basic tutorial, we've learnt basically a bit about the structure of Android, the AndroidManifest file, activities, layouts, and the intent filters as well. So just very basic intro to what happens when you set up your default project. The next tutorial we're going to be doing, moving on with the camera intent project, is we're going to be manipulating the layout a little bit, removing the hello text file and adding a button. So if you think you're going to like these types of tutorials, don't forget to subscribe, and there'll be plenty of links to follow-on tutorials, and also I'll be putting some background reference tutorials on particular basics of Android if they're very important and pertinent to these tutorials and learning about Android. Anyway, that's bye from me for this one, and look forward to talking to you soon. Okay, so I'm holding this up here now. I'm going to select take photo, camera button press. So we've validated that our button functionality does work. And that's all we really wanted to do for this tutorial. Very simple, just progressive bit by bit steps.